This larger project, as John mentioned, this was a sweet corn farm for a very long time. Very little else grown but sweet corn for a really long time. And when we went into this project, me having a small grains background, I knew that we needed some kind of crop rotation plan, that we just couldn't have a sort of ad hoc situation where it was random what crop preceded our small grains. I knew that was going to affect the quality that we got out of it, especially for the grains that we're growing out for our end users. And if you look on the back of the sheet where you see the map that I just passed out, and if you look at some of the rotations that are listed in those plots, and people tell me what kind of characteristics you see of the different crops, what kind of crops, different functions they might play in a crop rotation. Go ahead, anybody.
I'm not sure.
It's got broadleaf and grain crops.
Got broadleaf and grassy crops, that's one. Do you see any corn?
No.
Long history of corn, I've left corn out. That's year one that preceded everything. So this rotation started with corn.
Will you put corn in?
No, we're not going to put corn in. Any other characteristics you see in it?
Legumes.
What was that?
Legumes.
Legumes. This soil's been a long rotation, yes. Yep. This ground is inherently excellent crop ground, but the organic matter has really dropped from so many years of tillage. It's part of annual cropping. It burns up organic matter. And also the fact that they've had the same crop here every year. Something that can happen when you have the same crop every year after year is you build up a decomposer community that's very good at breaking down those residues. So even though corn gives back a lot of carbon to the soil, it can break down fairly fast. And there's a bunch of different interactions that can occur too to break down organic matter. So we wanted to get some diversity back into the system as well. Any other characteristics you see?
Roller crimping.
The roller crimping is part of something else.
Oh,
Yeah.
red clover oversown the rye every time.
Yep.
Yeah,
Got
you've
leggy.
got,
We've
from
got-
your following your rye, you've got basically 2 years of no tillage.
Yep. So we've got a full year of red clover where there's no tillage, basically. Starting with
Almost
the
2
planting of that
years,
rye.
yeah.
So we go a long period without no tillage. So between those two things, we're trying to work on both giving an opportunity to at least mitigate organic matter decline and to add some nitrogen, some inherent nitrogen fertility to the soil with the legumes. One thing that nobody mentioned is that everything except for the soybeans in there is a cool season crop. Corn is a warm season crop. Soybeans are a warm season crop, and even last year I noticed on a different field where we had it in our rotation, we had some issues with warm season weeds. I knew that warm season weeds were going to be a problem, and you even see it. Almost all this stuff, these are all warm season annual weeds that tend to build up when you're growing corn after corn. It's something that escapes a lot of management, and we'll see it if we end up going over there at all. And so the basic idea was to knock back weeds, build a little soil fertility, give an opportunity for the soil to sort of gain back some organic matter, or at least mitigate the loss of organic matter, and really prepare these grains for a good situation where we're going to hit our quality parameters. One of the things I had in mind when I was designing the rotation was I knew that our wheats, because we're shooting for sort of this baking market, especially bread wheats, you need a fair amount of good nitrogen fertility in order for for the wheat plant to be able to synthesize proteins. And I wanted to, to shoot towards getting some inherent fertility with the legumes in the system. And having those legume residues in the soil, because they break down over time rather slowly versus an organic fertilizer, gives the opportunity for that for an incremental nitrogen release throughout the grain filling period when they're producing those proteins. Let's see.
Yeah, one thing that I actually didn't, I just glanced at the rotations, but I'm going to bet that the soil is covered a lot of the year. Is that right?
In that rotation?
In your rotations.
Yeah.
And that's different, isn't it, than a lot of farmers. I mean, this ground was in sweet corn and often rye rotation, so it was pretty well covered. But a lot of the grain farms, which I'm going to be talking a little bit more about later, that all winter long the soil's bare. That's having it covered is a big plus.
Yeah. A lot of the farms, especially in the Hudson Valley, even if you're buying a new farm, there's a good chance that you're probably coming into a situation where warm season annuals have been grown almost exclusively with very few cool season crops. So it's really high chance that you have a high population of later season, warm summer annual weeds versus cool seasons. And greens sort of give you this opportunity to tackle that. There's something growing when they normally germinate. So there's something growing actively early on in the season that doesn't allow those warm season annuals to take over. Now it's a different story when you're talking about spring grains and you plant them late. And if we go over there again, I'll show you what happens.
How late is late?
The target date
July.
For planting spring grains is mid-April, around April 15th.
Here.
This stuff, because this is the wettest field, because we have logistical problems with getting our grain drill and a few other factors, we weren't able to get that planted until May 8th. The spring grains on this side were planted April 30th, I believe. Is that right, David?
Sorry?
April 30th is when we planted the spring grains, right?
Yeah.
So about 8-9 days earlier. And I can even see a difference in the weed pressure between these fields and those. And the organic side's more telling because there's no herbicide. And I can tell a big difference between the weed pressure that came earlier in the season with the earlier planting date and what I see out there. Fairly same, amounts of raw weed pressure otherwise. I don't know if there's anything.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are the weeds, the warm season weeds, actually germinating and then they just can't get going, or are you actually depleting the weed seed, or you're not depleting the weed seed bed? Which way is it working?
With grains?
With
the small
the
grains?
planting, yeah,
Yeah, so,
spring planting.
well, with the winter grain, when spring comes around, something's already growing. And you've got a canopy that's closed already. And when these warm season annuals, like this is probably wild Proso millet because it's just about everywhere on this farm. When this germinates, there's a total canopy. It can't get through.
So it is germinating.
Yeah, it probably is germinating. There might be less germination because there's less heat and there's less tillage going on. But yeah, it might germinate, but it's not going to go anywhere. It also gives it a chance, even if there is seed in the soil and it doesn't germinate, it gives it a chance to be broken down just through microbial activity or predators like mice and whatnot. What happened with these later plantings is that we planted these on May 8th. And I don't know if any of you are from the Hudson Valley, probably a lot of you are from the Hudson Valley region, but if you remember that week, around that time, it was about 90 degrees and got really, really dry. Totally different than now. My main concern was that we're going to go out, we're going to plant these grains, and we had to work with what we had to work with. We're going to go out and plant these grains, though, and all those things are going to germinate at the exact same time. And that's just about what happened. On this far side over here is our conventional spring barley. And if you go over there, superficially it looks fairly clean. But if you look close, there's a lot of wild proso millet in there. That's because the herbicide only took care of the broadleaf weeds. So in a sense, it selected for the grain and for wild proso millet. Now in the organic grains, we have a mix of everything, and we even have volunteer buckwheat in there from our last, it's not on the map because we had to change it up, but last year this whole field was buckwheat with crimson clover undersown. And we broadcast the buckwheat, and John cultivated it in. I can't remember if he roller harrowed it or if he actually tilled it in. But what happened was, because buckwheat is also a warm season annual, it germinated right with our grains. So it's all coming up at the same time, and buckwheat grows like gangbusters.
Is it flowering?
So that's the white.
Yeah.
That's buckwheat.
What was the intention with that buckwheat crimson clover?
We were nursing in the crimson clover with the buckwheat. It actually worked excellent.
That means
And we were choking out weeds with the buckwheat.
the buckwheat spread out, choked out weeds, the crimson clover was nursed in. What does that mean?
It nursed in means that because clover is tolerant of shade, it can come up underneath the clover, underneath the buckwheat. And then we came in when the buckwheat was ready to be mown off, which is about 35 to 40 days later. That crimson clover is established nicely, and it can take over. And that's exactly what happened. We had a beautiful stand of crimson clover here.
So did a certain percentage went to seed then, the buckwheat?
No, they're just volunteer seeds from last year.
Oh, the ones that didn't
It's a
germinate
down-
last year?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a
Broadcasting has these advantages, which is it's fast and it's easy, but it's got these downsides, whereas there's seeds all throughout whatever you know.
Yeah,
when you till it in, there's seeds up here and here and here, and then when you come in the next year, you bring them to the surface, just like weeds.
So now these are going to go to seed, and then you're going to have buckwheat in again.
Well, yeah, we probably will, especially
You're
with
always
the
going to have
buckwheat.
buckwheat in
Yeah.
there now.
Yeah, and I mean,
Was the crimson clover planted at the same time as the buckwheat?
yeah, they're planted at the exact same time.
So when you mowed the buckwheat, you didn't end up mowing clover that had germinated.
The clover will tolerate the mowing. Yeah, it's not an issue. But buckwheat will kill after a certain point. So there's a lot of stuff we learned in this first year.